Okay. Good afternoon. Muy buenas tardes a todos. Gracias por su presencia. Nos alegra mucho verlas aquí con nosotros. Thank you so much for being here. Good afternoon and welcome to the National Museum of American History. I'm Eduardo Diaz. I'm the director of the Smithsonian Latino Center, and we are collaborating this year during Hispanic Heritage Month on this very special Family Day in which we are building around the film Coco, an Academy Award-winning animation film, and also the winner of the best song, if I recall correctly. So to my right are two artists who had a lot to do with the film, and you'll be hearing from them, Ana Ramirez and Alonso Martinez. So we thank them for coming all the way out from the Bay Area in San Francisco, in California, to be with us. How many of you have not seen the film? Okay, we are screening it in the Warner Brothers Theater, which is on this floor in that corner at 3:30. So if you would like to see it then, you're certainly welcome. It's free to the public. Coco, in many ways, is a very strong reflection of who we are, particularly as Mexican and Mexican Americans, but I think because it's Day of the Dead, right? But I think Day of the Dead is very typical of many celebrations and reflective of many cultures within the Latino community. So Coco is just a great example, and you're going to hear more about the making of the film and how it was put together, and I think you'll really enjoy the conversation hearing from Ana Ramirez. Before I go any further, I would like to thank our ASL interpreters, Gustavo, Richard, and Michael. Thank you so much for being here. Also, for our Muslim friends, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for as well as being here. And how about a big round of applause for our tech crew in the back, who are so wonderful to have working with us. I want to thank, of course, the National Museum of American History, all of our colleagues who are here, who have made this program possible and to run so seamlessly. I will also note that off to my left, along this wall, we have some marvelous collections that we're bringing out from the Latino collection dealing with Spanish language broadcasting, the photographs of Frank Espada, Mongo Santa Maria. We have folks from the curandero community, from Texas in particular, Senor Don Jaramillo. Let's see, we've got Jose Feliciano's guitar that he just gave us. He played and sang the national anthem recently for a citizenship ceremony, and he left his guitar behind. That was pretty cool. And we have another project going on, Latinos in Baseball, which is an exhibit that will open in 2020, and we have some of the objects there as well. So, and also military history. We've got a lot. So we're busy collecting Latino objects here at the American History Museum. I want to thank Bob Horton, for example, from the Archive Center, and all the curators here who are making it possible, as well as our curatorial assistants. Let me also thank Magdalena Mieri. I don't know where Magdalena is, but she is the woman in the know here at American History, as well as Amy Berlos, who's here as well, and all of the staff here at the American History Museum, as well as our wonderful volunteers. Thank you to Randall Woodeman, who is the director of our exhibition and public programs, and Emily Key, who runs education, Adriana Aldaba, and all the staff at the Latino Center that are making this such a wonderful program and making it all happen for all of you. Want to also welcome our wonderful guests from the Museo Rodadora from Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua, Mexico, who are here, are partnering with us this year with their wonderful Alebrije Rana. We had a few technical robotic issues earlier this morning, but we're doing our best to resolve those. And also our friends from the United States Patent and Trademark Office, which is based here in Virginia. And I also, of course, you just heard from Sarela Martinez. She's amazing. If you don't have her cookbooks, I highly encourage you to pick one up. And finishing out the program this afternoon is all the way from Los Angeles, California, the mariachi, an all-women's mariachi, Grupo Bella, and they will be playing a few songs from the film. Surprise, surprise. Anyway, all of our key partners and funders, including the Walt Disney Company, of course, Pixar Animation Studios, and Southwest Airlines, which made it possible for us to bring some of the folks out. So I'm going to hand over everything now to my colleague, Randall Witteman, who's going to introduce Ana and Alonso, and we'll get on with the program. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Eduardo. Well, good afternoon. Welcome. Bienvenidos todos y todas. Thank you for being with us today. We've got about 45 minutes to chat with some amazing talent from the Disney Pixar film Coco. We've got Alonso Martinez and Ana Ramirez here. And essentially what we're going to do is talk for about half an hour on stage, and then we're going to open it up to you for about 15 minutes of Q&A. So, you know, I, for one, am very ignorant about the process behind the film Coco. It's obviously incredibly technically complicated. And a lot of us here have been thinking about both of you as animators, but in fact, that's not actually what you do, right? You're a technical director, you're an illustrator. Maybe you can sort of dispel the mystery a little bit about the process and describe what is it that you do or what you did on the film exactly and how you all work together to make a film like Coco.
Yeah, so in making a movie, it takes about 23 different groups of people. So at the beginning, it'll be a director that will come up with an idea. And so he or she will get a team of writers that will kind of help flesh out the movie. And then it keeps going into further and further departments. Ana, you want to talk about art?
Yeah, so I'm in the art department, so we are in charge of, you know, helping design all the visual elements of the film. So then we usually get the script from the director, and then we get the storyboards, and then based on that, they pitch a scene to us, and then the director tells us what he has in mind along with the production designer. And then, you know, they kind of like explain what they want, and then we come up with ideas of like, oh, maybe this design would work for that, or, you know, that design. We do a lot of research. Research, I think, is the most important thing for us. So we show our research before we start drawing, and then once, you know, they kind of pick and choose what they like from the research, then we, you know, start sketching and developing ideas.
Give me some examples of some of the early design ideas that you pitched. What were some of the first ones that you had to research and then propose to the director?
Let's see. Well, for example, I think something that was one of my first assignments when I joined the film was Miguel's mom, her design. So we didn't know if she was going to be pregnant or not. So that was like something we had to like do explorations on. And then I did a lot of passes on her design, on her costume design. So then, because we didn't know what she was going to be wearing, if she was going to be, you know, kind of like very traditional Mexican mom, you know, that kind of like cooks a lot and is like at home all day and like maybe wearing like an apron, or if she was kind of more modern, just kind of wearing more casual clothing and stuff. So I did a lot of explorations on that, and there's a lot of back and forth. Sometimes things get approved right away, and then it's really cool when that happens, but sometimes we kind of have to, you know, really put a lot of thought into it and like, do whatever feels right. So ultimately, like a design can be really good, but what is going to be the final one is what works best for the film and for the story. So.
And at that first level, are we really talking, I don't know, pen or ink on paper? Is that the level that you're working with for the sort of preliminary sketches?
Personally, yeah. I love working traditionally. Sometimes I work in Photoshop too, or like I edit colors and, you know, contrast and stuff like on the computer. But I really enjoy drawing with traditional media and on paper. So I do that as much as I can. But there's definitely times when I just have to address quick notes when I use the computer. Yeah.
Alonso, you're sort of at the other end, right? Yeah. You're highly technical, and you really work at the intersection of art and technology.
Right. So I'm actually not too far away from Ana's department. So after the art is done, then we work with the art department to interpret their drawings into the characters that we make for the movie. So I'm in the character department. So what we do is we take a drawing. First, I'll make a sculpture, which is pretty artistic, interpreting a drawing into a sculpture. And then once you have this object, but in the computer, not like a physical object, then you have to give it the ability for like a puppet being able to move it. And then you hand it to the animators who can do the acting through all of the controls that we give them. But like, for example, in this movie, so one of the things that I love the most about my job is that every movie you learn something new. And so for me, like for example, I worked on Dante, the Cholo Squinkle dog. And you learn that, like, so they don't have any hair. They actually also are pretty prone to genetic diseases, like where they lose their teeth really easily.
Yeah.
So they'll bite on something and then they'll lose a tooth. And because they have so many teeth missing, that's why the tongue slips out of the mouth. And so you learn about all these things and you try to incorporate them into the characters that you're making.
So give us a quick recap again. Differentiate. So how is an illustrator different than the work that you do as a technical director? And tell us again what is for. You're a character modeler.
Modeler and rigger.
Okay, modeler and rigger. And so differentiate the illustrator from the modeler and rigger, and then from the animator, just so that we can all sort of understand the a little window into the really how technically complicated this film is.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to mention this because I think it's important too. Ooh, sorry. I went to school for film and animation, so I was an animator in school. But then within animation, there's a lot of different things you can do. You know, there's like design, there's story, there's modeling, there's editing, there's compositing. Like there's so much. So while I was still at school, you know, it's like very general program for film and animation. But then people kind of start choosing the things that they enjoy doing the most in the process of filmmaking. So then I focused on design. So then at Pixar, I don't get to animate anymore because, you know, the design work that we have to do is like enough to cover our work hours there. So like we don't really get to do a lot of crossover. But there's a lot of people who do know how to do everything, and that complements what you do, which is really cool. But yeah, in design, I usually just do, you know, character design stuff, costume design, set design, some color work as well. And it just kind of stays in design. And then we hand those sketches and drawings to the modelers. And yeah,
So like Anna will make the drawings. I will make the sculptures in the computer, and then make those sculptures have the ability to move. And then the animators will actually do the moving. So they're doing the acting through the puppets that I make. Those puppets are inspired by the drawings that Anna makes.
yeah.
And these puppets are pretty mechanical, right? There's actually a big element of robotics that goes into it, does it not?
Oh no, so I mean these are all digital, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so just like you have a mouse in the computer, you can move it around, and if you like click on an eyebrow, then you can kind of make it go up or down. So it's just like, imagine it as if it was an action figure that you can kind of pose the action figure, but normally for action figures, it's not like the face that you can control everything. For these movies, the characters that we make have thousands of controls. So it takes a really long time to make them. For main characters, it'll take anywhere in between 4 months to a full year to make it. Yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about growing up and how you even got into this field, or even inspired to go into this field. Did you, either of you as children, ever imagine yourselves working at some place like Pixar, working on animated films? Was that something that you aspired to as kids?
I didn't know it existed. I mean, like, I watched a lot of Disney movies growing up and Pixar films too, but I didn't think of it as like a viable career for me because it didn't exist in Mexico at the time, like the career for animation, and I didn't know anyone personally who did it. But then I remember watching the special features in the Tarzan DVD where they show Glen Keane drawing and like flipping through the drawings of Tarzan. And I remember that really, really stuck with me. And I didn't understand how much it affected me at the time, but I was like, wow, that's so cool. They get to draw for a living. And then I tried other things, like I was an ice skater for many years. I tried taking music lessons for a long time, but I wasn't that good. And then my mom was the one who suggested I took a drawing class, and she was like, I feel like you would be good. Like, you love, like, you know, art and, like, watching movies and stuff. And I didn't want to, because I still wanted to, like, be a musician. But then I ended up taking the class, and I loved it. And this was my last year of high school. So, I don't know. It just, like, it all kind of happened without me really looking for it. Like, one thing led to another and another. So then that year when I started taking those drawing classes, I met, or my sister's good friend from childhood, I found out that he was going to CalArts, which is the school that I eventually ended up going to. But then he showed me his portfolio that summer, and I was like, yes, this is what I want to do. And then I was like, do you have to take math? And he's like, no. And I was like, cool. So then, like, that sold me. I was like, I got to go to this school. I don't know what that is. But then, yeah, I didn't really know how to draw, but I just kind of, like, I was like, this is what I want to do. I'm just going to work so hard and, like, get in. I don't know how I'm going to do it. And then I took 2 years off after high school, and I lived in France, and I went to art school there to kind of work on my portfolio. Then I applied to CalArts again, and then I got in the second time I applied. But, yeah, and then, you know, I got the Pixar Internship my 3rd year of college. So yeah, it's been crazy. Yeah.
You persevered and kept developing your artistic skill. That's great.
Yeah, but I didn't know that that's what I wanted to do. I think I just kind of discovered that, like, while I was doing things, and then now I'm so happy. Like, I love my job. Yeah.
Now, we'll come back to this in a minute, but you said you kind of fell into work at Pixar. You didn't necessarily see yourself ending up working at a studio like that, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's come back to that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you growing up and how you ended up where you are today?
Yeah, so for me, what's interesting is that Mexico, so Ana and I were both born in Mexico. And I was born in Monterrey, she was born in Guanajuato. And growing up in Mexico, something that I didn't know was different. Then I came to live in the United States, but what was interesting is I realized that Mexico as a whole was more interested in animation, and in particular, like Japanese animation. So we had all of these shows when we were growing up, like Caballeros del Zodiaco, or, you know, there were so many of them, and I loved them. And so as a hobby, I would just draw them all the time. And it was one of those things that I just kind of had a little bit of a knack for. Like, my older cousins would be drawing things, and they would be like, wow, why is yours better? And so it came somewhat natural. So as I was telling you earlier, my dad was, he studied chemistry, but right around the time he was graduating, computers started coming out. And he was one of the first people that in Mexico would, he would take components from different companies and assemble them and sell them underneath his, the name of his company. And so he was in computers, but my mom was in photography. And so the mixture between the art and the technology is basically what Pixar is. And so I really always strive to be in the middle of art and technology, is being good at both.
And how did you end up at Pixar?
Yeah, so I ended up at Pixar. So I originally thought I was going to do architecture. And then I went to this thing called National Portfolio Day, which is something that is here in the United States. You bring your portfolio and you get to show it to all the different art schools. And they give you feedback as to whether it's good or not. And one thing that a lot of them said was, wow, we would like you to come to our school, but you should really go to this other school that specializes in computer stuff. Because I had a lot of computer art, and they were like, you need to go to this school called Ringling. And then I went to Ringling. I made a short film. The short film, you kind of have to do everything. You do story, art, drawing, animation, lighting, everything. And then at the end of the 4 years that I was there, Pixar came to my school to like look at the students, and there was this really funny thing where everyone knew that they wanted to work at Pixar, and I never really felt like I knew for sure that that's what I wanted. I really liked fine arts, and I thought I was gonna do something less commercial. And so when Pixar came, I was like, I shouldn't even apply. There's so many people that want this so much more than me. And I wasn't gonna apply, and then a friend of mine was like, I'll bet you $5 that you're gonna get an interview. And I was like, okay, I'll bet you $5 that I won't.
Yeah.
And here I am.
Wow.
So.
Good wager.
Yeah.
I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah.
And you've been at Pixar for like 10 plus years, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Wow.
10 years.
So would you say you were recruited straight out of college?
Straight out of school.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so Up, Cars 2, Inside Out, The Good Dinosaur, Coco, Incredibles 2, and now I'm working on a new movie. Yeah.
There's a number of projects you can't tell us about.
Yeah.
Anna, you've been at Pixar for about 4 years. How did you come into working at that studio?
Yeah, so I also didn't know that I wanted to work for Pixar or Disney. I guess I just didn't think I could, so I didn't even consider it because I was like, I'm not gonna apply, like I'm not gonna get in. Especially because I feel like for a long time I felt very self-conscious about my drawing skills because everyone I was going to school with had been drawing since they were born, you know, or like in the womb. It's like they were so good, and like at the time I had only been drawing for like 2 years. So then I always felt very like, oh, I'm not good enough. Like I need
Imposter
to practice.
syndrome.
Yeah.
Don't let it get you down, folks.
Yeah,
it's all in your head.
totally. Yeah.
You are worthy.
Yeah. So then I was like, okay, I'm gonna put together a portfolio, and I had made a film that year that was inspired by a Mexican myth. So then I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this, and then I just put together all the stills from my film. And then I got a call back from Harley Jessup, who's a production designer for Coco. And then he was like, hey, I really love your work. Well, first of all, like we have this thing at CalArts called Portfolio Day, which is a similar thing, but in smaller scale, and it's just for our school, where like we leave our portfolios out on a table, and then people from the industry come and look. And then at the end of the day, they have like a board with lists of the studios and then the names of the students that they want to meet up with. So then my name was on the Pixar list, and I was like, whoa, I can't believe it. And my mom actually was with me because she was visiting that week. And then she like got super excited, and she was recording me having my interview, and I was like, Mom. So like now she likes to text it to me whenever she's nostalgic, and she's like, remember this day when it all started? And I was like, yes. How could I forget? But yeah, she happened to be there, and we were both like, whoa, so exciting. Then I had my interview, and I was like, well, whatever happens, this is already really cool. Like I never expected a callback. And then like a month later, they called me back and were like, we'd like to offer you the internship. So I was like, so cool. And then I was on Coco since. So that was like back in 2013.
So Coco's your first film.
Yes.
And as a film, it definitely went above and beyond in terms of trying to be authentic and tell the story right. Both of you, as you said, were born in Mexico, so you came into Coco with already some cultural knowledge. But I'm guessing you had to research a whole lot on your own and learn new things to actually tell this story correctly in an authentic way that really honored Day of the Dead traditions. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what that journey was like, and actually physical journeys in some cases, because you had to go to Oaxaca to do some research. So tell us a little bit about that process.
Yeah. So I mean, one of the, I think for me, the greatest growth had to do with just evaluating in how to make the movie right. We had to think about like making sure that it wasn't cultural appropriation, making sure we had a good understanding of like stereotypes, and there was a lot of kind of like ethical questions that I think I had never dived so deeply in, And I think the thing that I walked away with, it was basically like, there are stereotypes, and there are positive stereotypes, and then there's negative stereotypes. And we just wanted to make sure that the movie we were making, how it felt to Mexican people was like, oh, these people are like in love with our culture. And they just want to show the rest of the world how beautiful everything here is. And so, yeah, we tried to put that into the movie, and I think the response was really great. And I think another challenging thing was is this idea that traditions, for them to stay alive, to some degree, they have to be somewhat flexible to change.
Yeah.
And like, for example, the holiday of Dia de los Muertos, or Dia de Muertos, you know, it doesn't really have in our movie we said, if you don't remember somebody, then they die a second death. And that's really not like a part of the tradition.
Yeah.
Remembering people is part of the tradition. But I really like that. I think it's like this really beautiful thing. And if that's a way for kids to take it seriously and say like, oh, I don't want to forget grandma because, you know, she like might get forgotten. That's a way to keep that tradition alive with younger generations. And so I love that part.
Was there anything that that you learned in about Mexican culture in the process of working on this film?
Yeah, there was so much. Growing up there, I think you kind of like know a lot just by being there, but then there's so much more that I didn't know about. Like when we were working even on the costume design for the dancers at the beginning of the movie, like for the prologue. No, it wasn't it's part of the prologue, I guess. Yeah, I was just like designing dresses based on like the ones that I knew, like Jalisco, or you know, and then it's like, oh no, you have to like think about like where they're from, like what kind of dance they're doing, and what kind of region that's from, and what kind of dresses, you know, people who do this dance wear. So there was a lot of research, and then I had to like research a lot of different regional dances and which part of Mexico they were from, and like, you know, how many people are in the dance. Like there's all these things to it that I was not aware of. And even just like researching like indigenous communities in Mexico, so many groups, like so many groups, so many languages, like, and I kind of knew about some, you know, but then there are so many that I didn't know about. I didn't know where they came from, and I didn't know that some groups can live in different parts of Mexico and their language varies slightly too. There's like just so many things that I had to put together these like 4 boards and make charts of all the communities, and like, you know, print out the kind of different patterns that they do for their clothing and all that stuff, because all of that was really important. So for example, Santa Cecilia, like the town, imaginary. You know, it's it's very inspired by the south of Mexico, Oaxaca, and like their communities there. So we had to research that too, like the kind of patterns that go on their skirts and their shirts and all that stuff. Like it was very important. So there's a lot that I learned, even though I was born and raised in Mexico.
Right.
You know, there's always so much to learn, and our culture is just so rich. It's like I still don't know so many things, and you know, food, like everything's so rich and.
It's a universe unto itself, practically.
Yeah,
you know?
everything. Yeah, and there's so many different ways to do everything because every state does it differently too. So it's not just like, oh, this is like the dish, you know, like every state makes it different. So yeah, there's like, it's very rich, vast.
So for me, one of the interesting things was, so I'm a sculptor. And so my medium is, as opposed to pencil, it's like a volume. And so what's interesting is that when I'm helping design characters, I don't look at color. Every object I look at is just gray. And so a really good challenge for myself was, like, how do I, through only volume, make this a recognizably Mexican person? And then I had to dig, like Ana, very deep into like the different like indigenous backgrounds of Mexico. So you have like Mixteco, Zapoteco. You have like, you know, Incan, Olmec, Mayan, all those descents. But then you have the other influences of Mexico, which are like Spaniard and German and French, and how all of those kind of are this like beautiful gradient in between all these people. And when we were making our characters, we actually decided like this side of Miguel's family is more indigenous than the other.
Yeah,
And, yeah.
it's true. It's so varied. Like, oh, is my mic on? Yeah. Well, I just want to add something really quick that I found really interesting. Like, I took a DNA test recently. All my friends who have taken it who are not from Mexico get like 90% something, 10% something, like very simple, you know, just like two things. Mexicans get like everything. Like I have Asian, like 8%, like I have French, I have Spanish, I have indigenous, I'm like 50% indigenous, which is crazy. I didn't know that. And then I have like, from Asia, it's like Southeast Asian, Japanese. I got Ashkenazi Jewish, like so many things. And I was like, is it just me? And then I compared results with a lot of my friends from Mexico who did it too. And they all are like super mixed. So it's like, we wanted to make sure, you know, that's represented too. Because like Mexico is such a melting pot and like everyone's so mixed.
Complexity of heritages and different ancestors,
Yeah,
you know?
so everyone looks so different, yeah.
So we've got about 15 minutes left for the rest of the program, and it's really time to open up the, give you folks the mic. So if you have a question, let us know, raise your hand, ask your question. I will repeat it back to you so that the web audience can hear your question. How about this first question in the front row? And I'll repeat that. How long did the movie take to produce from beginning to end?
6 years.
About 6 years, yeah.
And Ana worked on it.
For about 3,
I think I was like 2.5 or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I saw, how about, yes, lady with the bun, and then we can go back to the front row, and then to your friend next to you. Okay, has the Disney Pixar's experience with Coco, is it inspiring the company to produce more Latino or more ethnically specific stories?
I would say.
I think so. I mean, like I feel like I was really worried. A lot of people were worried that it wouldn't do well because that would mean that not just for Pixar but for other studios, you know, it would be hard to gamble, you know, to be like, oh, let's make more cultural films. Like if Coco, Pixar's movie, didn't do well, I feel like it would have affected ability to continue making those stories at Pixar and other studios. But I feel like because it did so well, I feel like it kind of opened the door for other studios and even Pixar to consider, you know, making more of those films, hopefully. Yeah.
I would say that there's a lot of things we can't say, but I think you would be excited about the future things that are coming out.
Right. So we have a cluster of questions. I've got 2 questions here. Gentleman young man in the blue, then in the green, turquoise, and then the back. I'll try to follow that order. And orange in the front. Young man in the blue, what's your question? How did you get the inspiration for Dante?
Well, yeah, go ahead.
And remind us who the character of Dante is. For the folks
Dante's a dog, yeah. Doggo. Oh, so cute. Shoulders squintless. They're like, you know, traditional Mexican dog. And you can talk more about it because you modeled him. But he's so cute.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just like Lee really liked them and the way that, you know, Shoulders squintless looked and stuff. We had a drawing session at work once. It was the first day of my internship, and I was lost for like an hour trying to find the room. But then when I found it, it was like a drawing or a room where they have like, yeah, like drawing sessions just filled with like a lot of shoulder squintlers, like different sizes, and they were all just like walking around and so cute. Yeah.
So Cholo Squinkle, I think Lee saw, so it's the Mexican national dog, and so he definitely wanted to incorporate it in the movie. The interesting thing is that in the movie, that dog is used like a street dog, but in reality, that would never be a street dog because they're very expensive.
Sensitive.
Yeah, they're very sensitive. But they're very beautiful. The Aztecs actually used to use them as a kind of like a mythical kind of creature. And so they've always been a big part of Mexican culture, and so it was finding a way to kind of insert that into the movie.
Yeah, there's a museum in Mexico City called Dolores Olmedo, and they have a lot of cholos like in their gardens, and you can just go like pet them. Some of them are kind of aggro, but I think overall they're very like mischievous, and they're always doing funny things. They're very cute. Yeah. Yeah.
Good museum tip. Second row, sir, you had a question? I'm sorry, say that again? Well, what other characters beyond Dante did you work on in the film?
Yeah, I worked on Dante, Pepita, Miguel's mom, dad, and a lot of his uncles like Berto, Franco, Rosita. Oh, and I made the human version of Hector, the one that's singing to the baby, which it was funny because I made that character, and after I was done working on it, I asked some people at work, I was like, yeah, somebody thought that character was based on me, but I know that's not true. and then they were like, no, and they were like, it was based, yeah. It was really funny. Yeah.
Do you want to add anything to that, Anna?
Sure. Yeah, I worked on Miguel's mom. I worked on Miguel a little bit for like the at the end where he has the mariachi outfit, and then I worked on Mama Coco. I did her costume, and then who else did I work? Tia Gloria with her Otomi shirt. Yeah, a few little ones. I think I came in at a point where most of the characters were designed, but we always work on top of each other, so it's always a collaboration in the end. So I got to work a little bit on a few different ones. But.
Third row center.
Do you use proprietary tools or open source tools? And does the selection of tools have any kind of influence on your art?
Okay, do you use proprietary tools or open source tools? And does that choice have any influence on the art that you produce?
So there's two parts to my job. There's the sculpting. That one we use a software called Maya. Very appropriate for this movie. We use Maya. There's a student version that is free. So anyone can go in there and kind of start making objects in the computer. But then the other part, which is when we make our characters move, that is proprietary. You can do very similar things inside of Maya, but I really had to learn it on the job. Yeah. And then you do like Photoshop and...
Yeah, just very simple stuff like paper, Photoshop. Yeah, that's it.
And in terms of...
Oh, does it influence my art? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's, for example, Maya is one way of making objects in the computer, but there's another software that we're using a lot more nowadays called ZBrush. And ZBrush is more like clay, where you can make any shape that you want. Maya is a little bit more like an engineer. There's like different ways of thinking, and because of that, it kind of, it changes the type of art you make.
And I think we've got at least 3 more questions. And thank you, everybody, for making your questions short, sweet, and to the point, and following that tradition. Frida in the front row, what is your question? So in addition to being artists, you
Definitely. I feel like even while working on the film, I think it's important to be vocal about whatever opinion you may have. Like I feel like when I started working on it, I was a little bit scared because I didn't know how much I could say or how much I could be like, that's not right, or things like that. But then I think I was very empowered by a lot of people who were there, who were like, you should speak up. Like that's why you're here too. It's like we trust you and we want you to give you your like opinion. So I think Pixar is very good about like encouraging people to speak up and like voice their opinions in the rooms where like things are happening. So I've always felt a really big responsibility, even now that I'm not on Coco anymore and I'm on a new film. Like that still happens all the time. Even just like as a woman, like what are the stereotypes? And then for Mexico too, I think it was really important that people spoke up about something that didn't feel right or did feel right, and then make sure that it was as authentic as possible and as respectful as possible. So yeah, before and after the film, that work continues, I think, yeah.
I mean, the movie was being made like 7 years ago, and if you can kind of imagine all that's happened within the 7 years, when we were making the movie, it really felt timely that there were so many negative things being said about Latinx people that this movie just felt like such a good counter argument to that. And I think that one of the most exciting things about the movie is this opportunity to make people all over the world, and particularly brown-skinned, whether they're, there's not too many representations of main characters that are like brown-skinned. And whether that's just for Mexico or for all over the world, it was an opportunity for a little kid to be able to look at a movie and say, the most important person in the story is a person that looks like me. And that kind of empowering, that kind of gives faith in themselves to be able to go out into the world and be the main character.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Far left. You have a question? We have a fan of Pixar here, and who's interested in what are the key ingredients to a good story?
Yeah. For me, it's about bringing value. So basically, stories are. It's interesting that animation is you take real life, and real life is super noisy, and not everything you do is like meaningful. But when you're telling a story, you're removing the stuff that doesn't matter, and you're exaggerating the stuff that matters the most. And everything should be focused in trying to tell like a message. It's better when it's a hard lesson that you've had to learn in your life, or it doesn't actually have to even be a lesson. Sometimes it can be a question mark, like something that you're like really struggling to find an answer to. And if you can capture that feeling and put it into a film, then I think you're bringing something, you're creating value. So I would, yeah.
I feel like a good story comes from a very genuine place. I feel like it should come from like someone's very, very personal experience, so that they, so that it's believable. And also, I think a good story usually creates like empathy, or is something that's like relatable, because like Coco, like there's a lot of, like I think it was really popular in China too, in Japan, and like the culture there is so different. But then there's like, things that overlap, and then it's like the part that's like relatable, I think can be really important and really strong. So I think just like most good story, to me, like what makes a good story is like authenticity, and also being able to relate to it. I think.
And I know we've got actually 4 folks right now who want questions, but we actually only have time for one more, and that will be from the young lady in the far back that's had her hand up for a good 15 minutes. What's your question, please? I'm sorry, could you speak up, say the last part? How did the,
Did you guys feel that you guys would have that movie would have that impact on people to, be able to relate to, and like for example with Coco passing away and having people like for example I said my mother who lost her dad, and like it helped her cope knowing that, like seeing that on a cartoon, it just helped her cope knowing that her dad was in a better place. Like did you guys ever imagine it would be like that, like to help speak on to people on different levels?
So Coco struck a chord. Do you anticipate it being so emotionally resonant with so many different audiences?
I didn't anticipate it, honestly. Like, I feel like the reaction has been like a lot, like more enthusiastic than I thought would be. Like, I thought people would like it, but I just like didn't imagine how much people would relate to it. But I think it's really cool. Like, I feel like in Mexico specifically, people love celebrating death, and we celebrate Day of the Dead, of course, every year. And so for me, growing up, like, death is really sad, but it's also kind of a celebration of life. And people, Mexicans love any excuse to hang out and like get together and eat and drink, all that stuff. So then I feel like that's something that's like, oh, we're really sad that this person passed away and it sucks, but also like, let's celebrate their life, and it's always really festive, and like they try to make it positive. So I kind of grew up with that, but I know there's a lot of other cultures that don't have that, and for them it was like, whoa, like it can be fun, and you can like look forward to seeing them in another life, or it's like kind of opened the door for other cultures to see it differently, which I think is really awesome. Yeah.
Want to give us your outro?
Yeah. So I did not fully expect like the power of how much it would people would connect with, particularly that part of the movie. But something that I found really beautiful is while we were making the movie, there was a documentary that came out, which is really interesting, and you guys should look into it. It was a documentary about elderly homes, people that were not very conscious. They were fading away already. And what this documentary explored is if you put headphones on them and you play music that they used to love, all of a sudden it does something magical to your brain. And all of a sudden, these people would wake up and they would say like, "Oh, I remember hearing this song when your grandpa was blah 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 blah," and they're remembering all these details that they couldn't before. And 30 seconds before, they could barely talk. So it awoke kind of their personality, and their memories kept them alive. And that was an inspiration kind of for the entire movie, of this idea of a song that Nana Coco was really used to when she was younger. And even though she was in this kind of vegetative state, all of a sudden she would wake back up and remember her father. So that was really cool.
Well, our time is up for today. Thank you for hanging out. We actually have to wrap the program up. Why? Because Coco starts the second screening in 10 minutes. And I'm sure you all want to go check that out. Now, you guys are still going to be hanging out with us around the corner, right? You have a table, and that is where I would encourage all of you who patiently waited for your questions that went unanswered should go and follow up with Alonso and Ana. So thank you all for joining us today for this afternoon. The party isn't over. We're going to have some mariachi later on, and of course, if you want to see Coco, at the Warner Brothers Theater for free in about 10 minutes. Muchas gracias. Hasta luego. Oh, And also, we are interested in your feedback. We have posters on either side of the stage, maybe just over here, actually. And please let us know what you think about today and this conversation. Right over here. Thank you.